Hello, I'm Natalie, and this is Life After a Cult, the channel where we expose cult nonsense. We laugh at the absurdity, and we hopefully unbrainwash ourselves in the process. Now, we are going to talk about a topic that I get asked about this quite often, especially when it comes to the media. In fact, there is a new article out in the Daily Mirror about how my mom married my grandpa and what did Scientology have to do with that? A lot. We're going to look at that and I'm going to tell you the story. So buckle up, y'all. Hello to everybody in the live chat. Thank you for being here. Moderators as well. I appreciate your help. Let's put question in front of any question so I can find it. I'm going to try and star those. We also have a question of the day on this video, which is, what's the weirdest family dynamic you've ever witnessed? Can you beat mom marries grandpa? Let me know in the comments. If you're on the replay, I want to hear from you too in the comments. So jump on right in. Hey, everybody coming on in. If you all could do me a favor, hit that like button as you get in here and we'll get out more notifications and we're going to get going here. So let me pull up this article in question. This, I think this version of it is on MSN, but it originally was in the Mirror. It was the Mirror. That's what it was. Different one, I think, was in the Daily Mail. My mom married my step grandpa, former Scientologist, details wild family arrangements. Okay, first off, I think the article is great, but it almost feels a little bit like, let's find the weirdest photos of Natalie we possibly could have taken from that interview and put them in the article. But expression is everything. I'm going to link this down below afterwards too, in case you want to read the whole thing yourself. Now, here's the thing here. Let's get back to a little bit of a closer up here. So I want to be really clear about this because a lot of people hear stories like this and think, well, that's just a weird family making weird choices, or that would never happen to me. But cult thinking, especially in high control groups like Scientology, has a sneaky way of normalizing the abnormal. It rewires your internal compass so thoroughly, you stop trusting your own gut, and then dysfunction starts to look functional. That is such an accurate description of what my upbringing was like in Scientology. The dysfunction is what became, or at least we saw as being functional, or the way for it to be. And that tends to happen again in a high control group or a cult like Scientology. I can give you a few examples too of how this works. So in Scientology, if someone says, if someone does something messed up, like let's say your mom marries your grandpa, the focus isn't on whether that's emotionally damaging or confusing to a child. No, nobody sat me down to make sure I was okay with this when I got the news that my mom was going to be marrying my grandpa. There was none of that. The focus is on you and how you react to it. And it was my reaction to this news that I think ultimately is why I was sent away at the age of 13 from my home in Hawaii to a small town in Washington State in the middle of winter. I'll tell you more about that a little bit later, though. If you're upset in Scientology, that's called natter. Speaking badly about someone or complaining in Scientology, they call it natter. They got their own word for it, which right off the bat tells you that they are trying to, I think, again, normalize dysfunction. Scientology has its own language, and if you follow my channel, you're familiar with that. So that's one of the words Scientology uses. If you're upset, if I'm saying, hey, I just have feelings about this, my mom marrying my grandpa, and I don't feel okay with it, that's natter. That's me nattering. That means I have overt and withholds. You're told you're being judgmental, or in Scientology terms, you're dramatizing your case. Your case in Scientology is your reactive mind or your body thetans if you've already gotten rid of a reactive mind. So you're told you're dramatizing your case. You're taught to take responsibility for, remember, I was a child when this happened. It was probably, it was right before I was 13. So maybe I was around 12 or so. So somehow I had to take responsibility for any upset that I had about this. And in cult speak, that basically means figure out how this is your fault. If it's bothering you, it must have been your fault, is kind of the school of thought there in Scientology when it comes to this. So there was no like having a, in-depth conversation to talk about how that affected me or just even our family dynamic. My previous stepdad, was he now my stepbrother, was the aunt who pretty much had been a key part in raising me. She took care of us because my mom worked a lot and then she was at Scientology a lot. And my aunt really helped raise us. Well, that made her my stepsister. Did we or were we going to have to start, using different names for each other? And that's not something. It was addressed a little bit, but if you asked questions with an attitude, that gets you in trouble. Because you got to figure out how it's your fault if you're upset about it. Scientology teaches that we've lived millions of past lives and will live millions more. So what's the big deal if someone marries their father-in-law, right? What's the big deal? You might have been married to your cousin's goldfish in a past life. Who knows? That's another way that Scientology normalizes this dysfunction by telling you, well, you know what, you've lived so many lives, truly. Like, you don't got to be worried about your parents today. This is how so many in Scientology, whether they're public Scientologists who are not staff or C organization members, are put through these mental gymnastics. I mean, all Scientologists are, and it gets worse if you're on staff, and even worse if you are a Sea Org member. It gets even worse. So, because you've lived so many lifetimes, right? This just should not bother you. People have had all kinds of bizarre marriages. What's the big deal? Again, normalizing, making dysfunction seem like it's functional. Now, this belief is used as a coping mechanism, but it's also become a justification. It's like spiritual gaslighting. You've lived before. What do you care? You've had parents so many times. You've had children so many times in your past life. Why do you need them now? What you're doing now is the best thing for everybody on the planet. Again, dysfunction becomes functional. So if I were to really speak my true feelings, which I did to a degree, which is why I believe I got sent away not long after that, you get basically told, well, you're upset because your mom married your grandpa. Please, you've probably been your own grandpa 5 times over. Calm down, Natalie. So instead of saying, hey, that was really confusing and probably messed up, you say, you know what, I must be overreacting. I'm being too reactive. I'm stuck in my case. Because again, if it's bothering you, it's somehow your fault. No, this is not true. And it took so many years for me after leaving Scientology to begin to process this. Because growing up, there was no time to process it. It was like one disaster after another when you're when you have a multi-generational family in Scientology. And the truth is, being upset about your mom marrying your grandpa, that's valid. That's being human. Being human in a cult is being a liability. That's how they see it. In high control groups, boundaries aren't respected. They're actually erased. And in the Sea organization, for example, you don't have your own space, right? You sleep in bunk beds, shared dorm rooms. You could have 15 people in there, one bathroom if you're lucky. Some have to go to another building even for a shower. You eat in a mess hall. And if you get married, you might get your own room as a treat. And when I got married at 17, in part to avoid being in a dorm, we did get our own room, which was connected to another couple's room by a bathroom, and we shared the bathroom with them. And let me tell you, we felt like ballers, truly, because we're like, oh, we only got to share a bathroom with one other couple. Can you imagine living in your house? Now, granted, like, right, I'm not talking college students who are all living together, but you're like, full blown adult, even though in reality, we were teenagers. I was 17. We weren't even really like full blown adults. Our brains were not finished being formed yet. None of that. None of that there. I'm going to start some questions here. So, privacy doesn't happen. Personal autonomy, forget it, especially in the C organization. So, when you grow up in that environment and someone makes a choice that should be deeply questioned, like marrying a father-in-law, right? Marrying my grandpa, you don't question it. You can't. In my family, with a similar dynamic to in Scientology, you just can't ask too many questions because asking questions is the first step to being labeled a suppressive person. And once that happens, you lose your family, your community, your entire world. So it becomes a situation of, well, you either just accept it and try not to make too much of a stink so you don't get in trouble, or, what is the option really? And not long after my mom married my grandpa and I had questions about it, I didn't feel great about it. I kissed a boy for the first time. So this was, I think they got married when I was maybe 12. So this was several months later when I had turned 13. It was my first boyfriend. We were hanging out at the baseball field in this dugout. I totally remember. And he started kissing me and I thought, "Ooh, like my first kiss." Honestly, I thought it was kinda gross, and I, spit all the way home. I don't think I was ready for that. There was just, a lot of, and I thought it was, saliva and disgusting. So I probably wasn't ready for that. Well, word got back to my grandpa/grandpa slash grandpa dad, and because my mom was married 4 times, I refer to him as grandpa dad. It's just easier to keep it straight for myself and the crazy family tree, that I belong to. And, he sent me off to go live with my mom's sister for a while, and I remember my mom saying, because 'cause I'm like, "Why?" And was like, "Well, we just think you need to learn and see how other people live so you more appreciate what it is you have." And it was presented to me very much like I was some spoiled, entitled teenager. Now, granted, I was a young teen, but I didn't commit some crazy crime. I kissed a boy, and at 13, I don't even think that's that crazy. You guys tell me in the chat. Tell me what you think about that in the comments. How old were you when you kissed a person for the first time? I'd love to hear. Tell me in the chat. Tell me in the comments if you're on the replay. For me, that would have been 13. And looking back, I think I could have waited longer because I thought it was disgusting. Could also be he was just the world's worst kisser. That could be it. Fortunately for me, that changed later on as I got older. Okay, HC, you were 13. I'm gonna keep an eye on that as you guys comment on that. So, I was sent away for 3 months, and part of coming back to my family and being able to go back home to Hawaii was I had to accept this, that my mom and my grandpa were married, and that's just how it was, and I wasn't allowed to question it. I wasn't allowed to ask questions. I wasn't allowed to be upset about it. I wasn't allowed to express any emotion about it whatsoever unless it was positive. Which interestingly is exactly how a lot of my time in Scientology went, including being on staff and being a member of the Sea organization when I signed a billion-year contract, because 2.5 and 5 years is just not enough. Y'all know about the billion-year contract there in Scientology. So, it was really in ways, I think, even preparing me for that. Being away from my family for 3 months, I had met my mom's sister when I was much younger, but I hadn't spent a ton of time with her. At the time, I thought it was kind of cool because, well, one, I didn't know how long I'd be gone. I didn't know that I'd end up being gone for 3 months. But I thought, well, I get to see my cousins because my aunt had 2 daughters who were twins, and they were my age. In fact, they're only 7 days younger than I am. So I really kind of held on to that. Like, yeah, I'm going to go to Washington, go to school there, have a different experience, and it was very, very different. It was interesting, I'll say that, and cold, so cold. I was not prepared in any way, shape, or form to be living someplace with snow. I got off the plane with, you remember those jelly bean shoes? They're like some kind of plastic, and then there's all those holes in them. That's what I was wearing. And it was snowing where we were going. I had never even been in a car for more than maybe an hour. And we were going from, I think I flew into Seattle and we drove to their town. It was a couple of hours away. I do remember that. Yes, Cassie, jellies. That's what they were called. Jellies were the Crocs of the 80s, I feel like, right? Y'all remember that? Except they didn't have them for dudes. I don't think that they did. I'm looking over too some of the ages you guys are putting in the chat when you first kissed a person. 12, a lot of 12-year-olds, 13, 14, 16. Ooh, James Steele was 4. Bob was 16, Lisa Kelson was 15. So these are normal things, right? It's all very normal. Not so much in my household. And when you think about the irony, I got sent away for kissing a boy, or at least that's what I was told because I wasn't supposed to. Yet my mother's marrying my grandpa. That's not an issue. My grandpa, by the way, was married to my grandma. They got a divorce so we could marry my mom. You want to talk about uncomfortable? We were all living in the same house at the same time, too. And as a, preteen teen, it's like I wasn't sure what to think about it. And I really had nobody that I could even begin to process what was happening with. I'm not even sure I talked to my sister that much. And after my cousin ratted me out for kissing a boy, I wasn't about to talk to her about it and be honest about my feelings. And I guess in a way, it really did prepare me for life in the Sea Organization, which is similar to how I was living. Because, I learned very early in Scientology that being reasonable was bad. Being reasonable, listening to other ideas, no, that's not good. You should only be thinking one way, the Scientology way. So if my Scientology parents / grandpa are telling me that this is the way it is and this is normal, then I should just accept that. Reasonableness meant you were making excuses for not getting things done. So if something felt off and you hesitated, why are you being reasonable? Handle it. Like why are you hesitating? So when a situation made no emotional sense, like suddenly calling your step grandpa dad, you didn't process it. I didn't process it. I didn't handle it. I silenced my instincts. That's what I was indoctrinated to do in Scientology. And what cults do, cults like Scientology and other high control groups, and this is what I want every one of you to really hear, is they systematically disconnect you from your inner compass. This is what a high control group does. This is what Scientology does. If you are living in a situation where you are slowly, quickly, whatever the speed, being disconnected from your own internal compass, you are in a high control group or a cult. Because you should be able to, right, as an adult especially, make decisions for yourself. You learn not to call things what they are. You learn to rename trauma as, oh, it's something I need to address in my case. It's similar to like saying, like, you learn to call abuse dedication. Because if you're punished in Scientology, especially as a staff member, and you got to scrub toilets all night long because you were late to work, well, that's growth. That's discipline. That's you learning to be better. Well, no, especially when you're a teenager, especially when you're a child. And this is what gets done in Scientology over and over and over again in these ways. So abuse, you become conditioned to believe that abuse is dedication. My own daughter went through this when she was training to be a Scientology staff member in Clearwater. She had to clean bathrooms because she didn't make sales quotas. That wasn't even her job to sell stuff. That's a crazy thing. Yet she was still punished for it. She had to work on her feet 80, 90 hours a week when she was supposed to be there to be doing training to go back to her organization. And instead, she was just used as free labor. So again, abuse becomes dedication. She was a dedicated Scientologist. And when I was getting my daughter out of Scientology, part of the unbrainwashing, part of the deprogramming was to get her to understand that those things were abusive. They were a violation of her human rights. It wasn't just discipline. It wasn't just making it better in some way. It wasn't a growth opportunity. It was abuse. And in Scientology and other high control groups, you learn to accept the unacceptable. That's something you get really good at growing up in Scientology. And honestly, that's how dysfunction thrives in cults. Not because people are stupid or weak, but because they're trained over time to believe that the weirder something feels, the more it's probably your issue. And I share all this because there are people who might be watching this right now who are in groups or relationships where They're being told that their gut instincts are wrong. And if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. You don't have to be in a cult to experience cult logic. It shows up in families, religions, jobs, online communities, and even yoga retreats sometimes if you don't watch it. Dysfunction dysfunction, it doesn't always come dressed in black robes and chanting. Sometimes it comes with a clipboard and a smile. Would you like to do this free personality test? And then next thing you know, you're signing a billion-year contract. So let's talk about this article then and what is in there. I'm gonna read through this and we are going to chat about it. And I'm gonna go through and make sure that I'm starring some of your comments here because we're gonna go through that as well as we go through this. So let's see here. Uh My mom married my step-grandpa. Former Scientologist details wild family arrangement, which is kind of an interesting way to put it. It was a wild family arrangement for sure. A love story between a strip club worker and a paraplegic man resulted in a life following Scientology for 35 years and one hell of an awkward remarriage. I love how they worded that actually. I thought that was very to the point there. You know what I mean? Yeah, Tony Hoban and the corporate world. You're right. You're right. I can see that completely. Pause for Andrea. You need a call-in show for topics like this. I should figure out how to do that. I think it would be a lot of fun. So it goes on to say, let's see here. It was a confusing time for 5-year-old Natalie Webster, whose mom's relationship shaped her whole life after she married a hardcore Scientologist, only to divorce him 7 years later to marry his dad, aka Natalie's step-grandpa. Now, with a life of Scientology behind her and a family of her own, ex-Scientologist Natalie is fiercely devoted to exposing the abuses that she alleges exists within the controversial organization, which has raised eyebrows for years over its stance on psychiatry and the aggressive way it has dealt with critics. I mean, that's such an understatement, right? We talk about that all the time here on the channel, the way that Scientology has this long history of going after critics rather than, hey, what's going on that so many people are complaining about our harmful practice of disconnection? How do we change that? Can we change it? Can we do better? No, that's never part of it because you got to do what L. Ron Hubbard said. So let's see. However, in a candid chat with the Mirror US, and here another wonderful photo of me, Natalie detailed her own experiences with the religion, which all started when her mom met a new partner. Natalie, who has dedicated a YouTube channel detailing her life after Scientology, and they do link to it. Yay. And by the way, if anybody came to my channel from any of these articles, I would love to hear from you. So you can email me, Natalie at Life After a Cult, or just pop it into a comment on the replay or in the chat if you're here now. I'm curious. So my mom married a Scientologist when I was about 5 years old, and she met him in a very interesting place because for Scientologists, they're not supposed to be in these places. But she met my Scientology stepdad in a strip club where she was working, she added. Natalie pointed out how her mom was very young when she took her first steps into parenthood, and her birth dad struggled with addiction. So as a result, Natalie's mom tried to leave to make a better life. And that's true. My mom was in high school when she became pregnant with me, and I mean, it was almost literally a shotgun wedding from what I hear. But they got married before I was born. I think she was like 6 or 7 months pregnant, and you can even see it in their wedding pictures. And it was a different time. This was 1970. My mom had to leave her high school, and go to a high school for pregnant girls. I don't think they do that today. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they do. But that's what happened back in the day. On her new path, Natalie's mom ended up in a relationship with a Scientologist who also happened to be a paraplegic. He ended up getting custody of us. So then we grew up. For the next 9 to 10 years, we wouldn't see our dad. We were just with a Scientology family, she said. A couple of years down the line, Natalie recalled, my mom ended up divorcing my stepdad, who was also a Scientologist, and marrying his father. So my step grandpa, the only grandpa I knew from the age of 5, before joking, I refer to him as Grandpa Dad because it's easier. And I did let the reporter know who was doing this story that it is easier. It is easier because, again, my mom was married 4 times to my biological dad, who did struggle with addiction till the day he died. My first stepdad, who she met when she was working in a strip club. And from there, things did get more stable for her for a while because, again, she was married to somebody who struggled with drug addiction, and she didn't have an education, which is why she was working in a strip club, which is when they met, and getting her into Scientology. Like, I could see in looking at it through her eyes back then, I can see how that would appeal to be like, oh, there's like this stable family, right? And Scientology must work then because of it. It brought stability to her life in a way that she didn't have before, or at least it started out that way. It definitely did not stay that way. That's so funny, Anna. I just saw your comment. I'm starring those. We're going to go through them. All right. So goes on to say, when asked if this was considered normal in the world of Scientology, Natalie insisted, no, not normal, not even in Scientology. Before delving into the beliefs, we've all lived millions of lifetimes. So you've had wives and husbands, and it just shouldn't be a big deal. So from a Scientology perspective, this wasn't a big deal. And that's what I tried to explain to the reporter, because it's crazy. It's one of many. You have to do all these mental gymnastics in Scientology. So much of what I share makes no sense because it doesn't. It was illogical. It made no sense. It does not make sense. But you do these mental gymnastics to try to accept it. Like, well, I've had probably, normal parents a ton of times. So in this lifetime, if my situation is a little unconventional, to put it lightly, then I should be okay with that. That, as a young up and coming Scientologist, that's what I would think about. That's how I was meant to view it. Christy, great question. Do you call your stepdad dad, or did you call his father grandpa? So my stepdad, we always called him Brian, my first stepdad. We never actually called him dad. And grandpa was grandpa. His dad, we called him grandpa. Now, after they were married, I do remember having the conversation with my mom of like, hey, do we have to call him? I mean, we didn't even call Brian dad, but it felt weird calling grandpa by his first name. And it was decided that we would just keep calling him grandpa. So when we had to address him, when we were forced to, like I wasn't right in front of him. If I had to call out, it was like, oh, grandpa, to get his attention. So we still called him grandpa when he was married to my mom. And honestly, I don't know what felt odder or stranger now that I think about it. Like, what felt more weird, calling him grandpa? I don't even know. Honestly, I don't even know what was weirder. Calling him grandpa when he was my stepdad, or what. But dad was off the table. That just was not going to happen. Let's see here. Okay, so the article goes on to say, yet within Scientology, especially the C organization, a name given to the most dedicated group of Scientologists, you work 24/7. Pretty much you live in dorms. You eat. It's like you eat in a cafeteria. If you get married, and you're lucky if you get your own room in this organization, and there is no premarital sex. We talk about that a lot on the channel. When you're in the C organization, unless you're married, there's no touching each other in a fun way. You get in trouble for that. And, again, like as a teenager, like, okay, I get to a degree in a Scientology family getting in trouble for that. Same thing happened to Tom Cruise's niece, by the way. His sister had a daughter. She was almost the same age as me. I think she might have been a little older. And she kissed a boy. And it was caught on security cameras. And Tom Cruise got upset and banished this child from the family. This girl did not see her mother for 2 years. I don't know if she went to live with other family or just, other Scientologists, but that is what happened. So, it's not like I'm the only one. Now, there wasn't a marrying the grandpa situation, but the being sent away for a minor infraction. And then again, in the C organization, you can't have premarital sex. Yet, and of course, I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to know. And as a child and someone who was punished and sent away for asking questions, I wasn't about to ask questions when I got back because I was curious, like, how long was this going on? They worked together. So my mom and my grandpa at the time and other people, they would be off at a bar after work. My grandpa, in my opinion, was an alcoholic, and they would spend a lot of time in bars and going to bars after work. She would be gone a lot. And so my understanding is that this, romance, which makes me want to vomit in my mouth, even saying that, started prior to him splitting from his wife of, oh my gosh, 40 something years to then marry my mom. So there's no way that it wasn't. But like I said, I didn't want to ask too many questions. So let's see. So growing up in Scientology, you're often raised to become a Sea Org member. It's like a Catholic family having someone become a nun or a priest. So a Scientology family, they'd be proud of this. They'd be down with this, Natalie continued. And then, and it's true to a degree, having your kids going into the Sea Org and dedicating themselves that way. Lisa Kelson, you can hang out in bars if you're a Scientologist, a public Scientologist, or even a staff member, but not regularly, not to the degree that they did. I don't think Scientology knew, to be honest, but you would get in trouble for that. You absolutely would. All right. So where was I? So I would say, as far as affecting my family, that when I was conscious of it, it was probably when I was older, right after my mom married my grandpa. I wasn't down with that. It was confusing, Natalie admitted. After 35 years following Scientology, Natalie is now broken free and has a new life. And that is how that ends there. But it's so interesting to me that I never would have thought people would be interested in this story. And not until I probably came on YouTube and started talking about it and then having, different people in the media reaching out and asking about it after you do one story and then they cover it again. And they've reached out about too, like my Mark David Chapman story and how him murdering John Lennon got me started in my indoctrination in Scientology. It's curious to me, and it's funny how what they grab onto. And I've always felt, hey, come if Grandpa Dad got you to my channel, wonderful. Hopefully you stick around and learn more about why Scientology is a high control group and a cult, and how you can spot other high control groups and cults and get something out of it that way. Mock says, my biological was jealous of my mom's relationship with us and dad. So he did everything to destroy the bond and get her solely for herself. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a fun family dynamic either. Anna says, girl, I'm from WV, West Virginia, and even I haven't heard of this. You win. Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of times I'm going to win the crazy family Olympics. Bob says, when life hands you lemon, Natalie made a margarita. Sharon Keogh says, my father's brother married my mother's first cousin. That's the best I can do. Okay, let me get that straight. Your father's brother married your mother's first cousin. Okay, so related by marriage, not by blood. Got it. That is crazy, though. Phil Jones, Tom Cruise apparently kicked his 14-year-old niece out of the family for making out with a boy. Exactly. Chantel says, my mom got sent away to family friends when she was 14 for dating a college guy. I didn't have a boyfriend until I was 23. Mom and I were obviously different. Whoa. And that was even allowed. Wow. I would, as a parent, I'd be like, hell to the no. That is not happening. Wow. Debbie with an I says on Mary on Housewives of Salt Lake City married her grandmother's second husband after her grandmother died. That's right. That's right. And the age difference was crazy, which similar to my mom's situation. I mean, she was probably in her late 20s when she married my grandpa. And my grandpa easily had to have been in his 60s by then, easily. And he looked like a grandpa. He looked older. But I remember that from the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. You're right. She married her grandmother's second husband after her grandmother died, which is weird. It's just weird. Right? Don't you think? I thought it was really weird. Magnus says having a first and third wife without ever having a second wife might be the weirdest ever. Yes, L. Ron Hubbard somehow had a first and third wife, but no second wife because Scientology likes to pretend that never happened. But we know that it did. Yeah, Lisa, that's why I don't watch that crazy show. Makes you ill. Yeah, I thought that was weird too when she married the grandmother's husband. I don't understand like just why. I remember watching that show, and this was the Real Housewives of Utah. And what did she say? It was like somehow it was a promise she made to her grandmother to take care of her husband. I think there's way of taking care of your elderly grandmother's husband that doesn't involve marrying them. That's the part I don't get. If anybody knows more to that story, tell me because I can't make it make sense. James still says, Natalie, but it could have been worse if your grandpa had married your dad. Yes, I agree. That absolutely would have been worse. Bach says, if you even had to ask what to call your stepfather because he used to be grandpa, something was already off. I agree. And it was the craziest thing. Like even my step grandma at the time, because we were all living in the same house. We had moved in with them before I even knew that they were having a relationship or getting married. I was just bummed because if we were moving, that means she was going to be divorcing my stepdad. And I adored my stepdad. Those few years with my stepdad were probably the closest thing to normal in almost my entire life, except for maybe actually almost for my entire life. It never, I used to look back and think, like when I first started working on my book, I thought there was just a few years where my life was really crazy and I started making a list of all of the things and it spanned my lifetime. And it wasn't a few years, it was year after year. There was some crazy shenanigans going on because of our being in a cult. And of course, my cult was Scientology. Let's see. Okay, Mama Opal says, my uncle was married to Myrtle for 50 years. He dated Cindy during that time and then had kids with Cindy's niece, Mindy. Wow, you got to draw this one out to get it straight. Myrtle would babysit for her grandkids and Mindy's kids. Oh, isn't it weird how sometimes we do just normalize things that should not be being normalized because that's all we can do? And as a kid, I didn't really have any other option. I found out that questioning got me sent away to a very cold place. But acting or at least having no reaction to it, right? Putting in my training routines or TRs, as it's called in Scientology, was the closest thing I could do, normalizing it. I remember being in high school because once they were married, or I think it was before they got married, we moved out of the house. So my grandmother kept the house that we were all living in. And me, my mom, my sister, grandpa, dad, and one of my aunts and her daughter all moved into another house. And multi-generational family living in Hawaii is very common because it's so darn expensive. And it's just part of the culture for a lot of the different cultures that are there where families live together multi-generationally as well. You take care of the grandparents help take care of the kids. And as the kids grow up, they help take care of the grandparents. That's just how it was done. The boobologist has a question. Was her marriage to Brian bad? And was she already leaving him, or did Grandpa Dad prey upon your mother? Good question. I never had a conversation about this with my mother before she died. We were out of Scientology for 2 years before she passed away. I do believe that Grandpa Dad preyed upon my mother. He was what in Scientology is called like an opinion leader. I've heard it outside of Scientology called like a thought leader. I often refer to him as the cult leader of our family because he would talk about Scientology all the time. He would sometimes, come home drunk from the bars with my mom and wake us up in the middle of the night to lecture us about Scientology and life. He would just like go on, and we weren't allowed to do anything but sit there because we should have our TRs in, our training routines. We should be able to sit there. And I got so good at sitting there and looking like I was paying attention, and I would go other places in my head. I think that was my way of escaping a lot of that as a child, which I don't think is uncommon when you're in a traumatic situation. So I would daydream about a lot of other things, and I would just like kind of like, look and make like I was, and if he laughed, I laughed even if I didn't know what he was saying. If other people laughed, I laughed. I had no idea what was going on. I just knew even as a kid that I needed to somehow protect my brain from what he was saying. Like I didn't want to hear it because a lot of it was crazy talk and it was a lot of Scientology and his own twist on it. But I do think that he preyed upon my mom, who again was very vulnerable. She was in her late 20s. She didn't have the best upbringing. She didn't grow up in Scientology, but she definitely grew up in a completely dysfunctional household filled with abuse. So, I always felt kind of did the best that she could do with what she had to work with. At no point, even whether it was growing up or, being an adult in Scientology or when I left Scientology, did I have any animosity towards my mom for getting us into Scientology because I knew a bit about her upbringing. And I really felt like she was doing the best that she could do with what she had. And she didn't know a lot. She didn't have an education. She was a really hard worker, though. She worked a ton for my stepdad and then went to work for Grandpa Dad. Oh, Love Wins got one. Let's look at this. My grandfather's first wife divorced my grandfather and married his brother. My grandfather's first wife. Oh, we recently, in the last several years, found out we have uncles we did not know about. My grandfather disconnected himself. Wow. Has anybody in the chat, or if you're on the replay, did you do 23andMe or Ancestry, whatever it's called, and find out you had some relatives you didn't know about? I'm not talking the distant ones. I'm talking like brother, sister, parent, anything like that. I have heard of that happening. So I think in this day and age, even more, it's harder to get away with. But back in the day, and it was so much more, you just didn't ask questions. Even outside of Scientology, even outside of a cult, I feel like, that's kind of the way that it was. Let me grab my aloha button. Aloha. Thank you, Christy Lynn Wilson, for that super sticker. The fact that Scientology applauds people for suppressing their natural emotions is disgusting. Yes, it is. And thank you for that. And you're right. And that is all a part of it. I've had multiple conversations with different neurologists for different issues that I've had. Ultimately, they call it, I even forget what they call it. Functional FND, functional neurology, something or other. I don't know if it's disease or disorder. I think it's disorder, but I'm not sure. Your brain rewires because of the trauma. And then your nervous system gets all messed up. And for me, it started manifesting in like horrific full body muscle spasms and a host of other issues. And it's something I've been working on for years, is getting, making that better. And I have quite a bit considering where I started. Like interestingly, it didn't get really bad till after I had, left Scientology. And I think I just wasn't, it's kind of almost like when I started trying to process what had happened in my life the last 40 years, 35 of those in Scientology. My mom married my stepdad when I was 5, is when it kind of all started happening. But it's that suppressing the emotions, not processing them, just stuffing them all away as Scientology indoctrinates you to do, and accept only their truth. That causes actual disease and disorders within our body. Chantel says, my maternal grandfather was a minister and my mom was the oldest child. I think a lot of her teenage behavior was rebellion. She also got in trouble for dyeing her hair and smoking cigarettes. I don't doubt that it was rebellion. I've heard that it's often the children of the preachers that are often the most wild. Tell me what you guys think about that. Nancy Stidgen, thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you so much for gifting 10 Life After a Cult memberships. Anybody who got one, please throw some alohas in the chat there for Nancy. I love that. I love it when people get memberships like that. Thank you so much for that support. Pinch Leslie, the brain was starting to rewire outside of that toxic, abusive setting. Yeah. I forget the exact science behind it, but the fix for me was and is specifically cognitive behavioral therapy and neurological physical therapy. I had doctors kept putting me in physical therapy. It kept making me worse. Neurological physical therapy is different. And when I started to do that, it got better. And if I stay on top of my exercises, all the things we should be doing, eat well, sleep well, my sleep is huge. I can manage it pretty well. But if I get exhausted or tired or fatigued, then I'll start even slurring my words where I'll sound like I'm either drunk or I had a stroke. And it's one of the reasons I don't like to do videos in the evening if I can help it. I don't know if you guys noticed that. The most of my content, I do a morning recap of Scientology news. I'm now doing it on Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday mornings, 9 Central, 10 or 11 on Saturdays, Central Time, and I'm doing other content on the other days. But one of the reasons I try to do it earlier is because my body does get exhausted and fatigued easier. I mean, I got the autoimmune stuff too. And I will sound like I'm drunk or I had a stroke. It's harder for me to think. So if you watch some of my videos if I'm on in the evening, you might notice that, which is fine. But as my doctors, the medical team I've worked with, they've told me over and over again, because I don't listen, but I try to listen, that our brain uses like 30% of the energy of our body. And once you're through that and you use all your spoons, there's like nothing left. So my brain will start to try to shut down functions. My vision will go really wacky as well. And this can even happen to me during the day if I didn't get enough sleep. If I manage to overly fatigue myself, then that stuff can happen. But I'm just happy that I at least understand what's happening more and have a way to, make that better. The boobologist, if you remember, Hunter Biden had a relationship with his sister-in-law after Beau died, some say even before. Yeah, this whole, these family dynamics, I mean, it can get crazy and it gets found out. I feel like, I don't know. I think if you really looked, I would say majority of families probably have something back there that could definitely come on the crazy train. Maybe your mom didn't marry your grandpa, but even like this, it's just these things happen. Sherry, no way. Sherry says my ex-boyfriend married my aunt. Girl, seriously. That feels even weirder to me than my situation, but maybe because mine happened a long time ago. My ex-boyfriend married my aunt. Your ex-boyfriend married your aunt. If you feel comfortable saying, what's the age difference? You got to tell us more, Sherry. I'm going to keep an eye out for you in the chat there. Tony Hoban says, my neighbor growing up found out that he had married a first cousin after several years of marriage. I guess they both were from very large families. Second, third cousin, I could kind of see, but first cousin, you really got to have a big family to marry your first cousin and not know. But back in the day, wasn't that kind of common, especially if it was within royalty? I'm not saying do it or that I think it's okay and I'm going to run out and do it, but there was a time where I feel like it was a bit more normalized to marry your first cousin, but this is not the time. It's not. I don't know when this happened. But which Tony, here's an interesting question then. Like what happened when they found out? If you've been together for several years, let's say I found out that my Tony, and if you're new to my channel, my Tony is my partner who sadly passed away last year from cancer after a 3-year battle. We were together for 11 years. Let's say a year in, I found out my Tony and I were first cousins. I'm thinking, what would I have done? Would it have changed anything? I mean, we already would have been intimate like a ton. I don't know. I probably would have stuck with it. I think I'd like to think that because I mean, we weren't going to have children together. I don't know. And I guess it's not by marriage. Oh, that's a tough one. The more I think about it, the more I'm not sure what I would do. Interesting. Wow. Cubana Chica, I don't know if it's legal or illegal in most states. I mean, first cousin, I don't know, might be okay legally. I'm not sure though, but it is very much giving that, VC Andrews, right? Remember that? What was the name of that book? And then the subsequent, they did some movies about it. Oh, what was it? Something about Flowers in the Attic. It's very Flowers in the Attic. Did you guys read Flowers in the Attic? Was I the only one? So Flowers in the Attic. Put a one in the chat if you read Flowers in the Attic. If you're on the replay, I want to hear from you. I feel like anybody my age kind of grew up on Flowers in the Attic. There was like 1, 2, or like 3 of them, right? Wasn't there, Dawn? Wasn't there like 3 books? Okay, so some of you did. Jersey Jan, Anna, Northern Girl, Dawn. Yeah, then there was a show. They made it into like a show, a movie, and then they redid it again. I actually thought when they redid it, it was pretty good. Rem Art says, as long as you aren't procreating, I think it would be fine. I believe it was illegal because of genetics. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Isn't it funny how we have to come up with certain laws to stop us from doing stupid things that just you think we just wouldn't do? Like marrying your sibling. Wow. Anna says there's a community that does marry first, second, and third cousins. One of them married their first cousin's daughter. Ooh, that feels a little ick. One of them married their first cousin's daughter. So it's kind of, would that be kind of like second cousins? That still feels bad. And some of you saw the movie. Cool. That's good. Debbie with an I says, my mom's mom divorced her dad and married his brother. Mom's dad remarried and had kids who to this day don't know my mom is their half sister. She's 91. Oh, let me get this straight. So your mom's mom, my mom's mom. So your grandma, your mom's mom divorced her dad. Your grandma divorced the dad. So your mom, your grandparents got a divorce. And then your grandma married her brother-in-law. Mom's dad remarried and had kids. Wow. That is interesting. And does anyone talk about it? I'm curious about it because we never talked about it. Like hardly ever. And later it became something I just wanted to forget. Yeah, Magnus, exactly. Never underestimate the stupidity of humanity, where we got to make laws telling you not to marry your siblings or, whatever. You shouldn't be murdering people. We're going to make laws against that. It's just to make sure y'all aren't tempted. There has to be jail. And let's be real. There's been a time I feel like I know, I mean, I never like planned it, but how many times we're like, oh my gosh, I could literally kill that person. And then I'm like, no, that's not right. No, 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 not today, Satan. Get rid of that thought. And then try and find at least one thing that I can appreciate about the person. That's what I try to do. The emphasis is on try because sometimes it's hard because some people be cray cray. Marcy says, I read the books, didn't see the movie. Oh, Marcy, you should check it out. I want to say it was like on the Lifetime thing, Lifetime channel. James Steele, what about stepchildren marrying? No. Oh my gosh. No, I hope not. But somebody did it, I'm sure. I'm sure that they did. I don't think I personally know anybody. Philip Jones says, I saw a number of times in Scientology where a marriage broke up because one spouse met his apparent past life love. Is that how they justified it, Phil? I mean, I saw the same thing. In fact, I wonder if we're talking about the same couple. There were these two couples in California, and they were very high level Scientologists, meaning they had done a lot on Scientology's Bridge to Total Freedom. In fact, two, maybe all four, two of them were definitely operating Thetan level 8s. So this really narrows it down. Some of my former Scientologists, you might know who I'm talking about. These two couples each hooked up with the other spouse, and then they ended up just basically swapping and marrying. Nobody questioned it, which I guess if you act like it's normal, then nobody questions it. And that was like my stable way of thinking growing up is I'm just going to act like it's normal that your mom marries your grandpa and then nobody questions it. So, and I remember even telling my kids at times, because our family dynamic, we have a we have like I have relationships with all of my children's fathers. I know when I say it like that, it sounds like I've got 60. No, there's 3. I was married to 2 of them, and one I just call baby daddy. And we've traveled together. My first husband, Dan, him and his fiance, and even his fiance alone has stayed with me. Both Tony and I when he was alive. Yeah, but I can't even imagine something like that. I really can't. That's right, Jen Sell. The books were passed around middle school with heavy underlining of key passages. Wow. Sharon says, my first cousins on my mother's side look very much like me and my siblings. Well, and now you know why, right? Wow. Anna says, said community had a reality TV show for years. Yeah, this happens. It happens. Yep, reprise 53. That's kind of what most of law is, addressing the lowest common denominator. It just really seemed to be that way. Northern Girl says, I once saw a story of a couple who fell in love and were going to get married. They found out they were brother and sister, both from same donor. I don't know what they decided to do. Oh, now sibling, I would probably put a stop to it. Yeah, if I found out. So if I found out he was my sibling, yeah, I think it would immediately stop. Immediately. And I lusted after this man, let me tell you. The entire time we were together. That is one thing I'm so thankful for. We both we were just on each other. We just loved being close to each other. But if I found out that he was a sibling, yeah, it would have ended right then and there. I'd like to think that we'd still, then just have a family relationship. Oh my gosh, what a gross thing to have to even entertain and think about. I bet this wasn't on your to-do list for today. How grossed out would you be if you found out your spouse was your cousin? Or were a sibling? I can't even say that one. The boobologist says, I work in a community where there's a high cultural diversity, and in other countries and cultures, it's not uncommon for cousins to marry. Very true. That is very true. And I think that's something to take into consideration. And back in the day, right? Wasn't it even how monarchies preserved their monarchy? The royal blood was keeping it in the family. So cousins would marry the royal family in England. Isn't that how it worked? I don't know that that works that way today, but yeah, it is crazy. It's funny some of you saw that show too. Okay, so Debbie was an I. You didn't find out till you were 11. No one talked about it. Once her bio dad asked her if she knew who her father was. Grandma's second husband adopted my mom. Wow. It can get very confusing, especially back in the day where it seemed to be like you just cover that stuff up, right? But now with 23andMe and what's that other one I always forget? Ancestry.com. How do you cover it up? And by the way, yes, I have not gotten to fixing my nails yet. I started painting them, but now because I don't like the color, because I do a lot. I do, I'm cleaning, I'm doing all kinds of things and it gets chipped. I don't like it. So I'm going back to the clear coat as I grow my nails here. Oh, K-Rad. I know first cousins that married 50 years new, have kids and grandkids. Okay, 50 years. So they were married for 50 years and they were first cousins. Back in the day, it wasn't that uncommon. I mean, I wouldn't seek it out. You know what I'm saying? I don't think so. Squabble up, foo, welcome. You may have to go replay on the beginning stuff because it's great. James Steele, was it true about the swinger parties in Scientology? Okay, James, this is new to me. So you tell me, James, what do you know about swinger parties in Scientology? I doubt it unless, I mean, there might have been a one-off, right? Maybe at some point. But in Scientology, they're now when you're an everyday public Scientologist, Scientology call their parishioners public Scientologists versus staff or C organization. So if you were an everyday Scientologist, no, they wouldn't allow it. Here's why. I remember a situation. There was a couple who were, they were swingers, and she got on to operating Thetan level 7 and got in trouble for it. Was like, hey, we are in Scientology, like, we're not okay with that. That's unbecoming of an operating Thetan for you to be doing that. And I remember I was told, she said, you're not going to tell me who to insert the F word. And so I don't know if they actually stopped or what happened, but I would have a hard time believing today that there were a bunch of swinger parties in Scientology. You guys tell me if you've heard something else. Tell me if you heard something else, because I have not. Now I got to look. So James, you got to tell us the backstory there. Yeah, that's right, Don. You can do those tests right through the mail. Yeah. Chantel says that's why the Hashbergs died out. All that royal inbreeding. Some really messed up physical issues happened. Yep. It would. Not good to be doing all that inbreeding. There's a reason why it's frowned upon. That genetically, it's just like not, I don't think that's how we were made to. We were made to go into other families and connect and have children, not with each other. SB says VC Andrews wrote Flowers in the Attic, but she also wrote another series, Heaven, Dark Angel, Fallen Hearts, Gate of Paradise, and Web of Dreams. Lifetime made this into a miniseries. Oh, was it similar topic, SB, or was it different? Okay, Anna says, oh my gosh, think about how many people born from artificial insemination will marry or date their siblings, especially the ones that came from the doctor who donated for all of his patients. Exactly. That's right. That was a story where there was a doctor who did insemination and he was donating all of his own supply instead of using the dad's, and that came out and just blew up. That was in the news. Ew, ew. And you're right. How many? Weren't there like hundreds? And if you're going to the same clinic, you probably live in the area. So yeah, I think that actually gets kind of dangerous there. Make sure y'all like this video of this crazy topic we're talking about here. Fun fact about a biology test on genetics, I got the bleeder illness family tree of Queen Victoria, I think, and I recognized it immediately by the degree of incest. Wow, I don't know. What is the bleeder illness, Mock? Is it like, the blood doesn't, is it a lot of bleeding? I don't know. And that's right, Cubana Chica. If they wouldn't let Natalie swing on a pole, they are probably not allowing swinger activity in Scientology. You would get in trouble for it. It's not considered ethical, even though even L. Ron Hubbard said that Scientology as an organization shouldn't involve themselves in the sexual activities of its members. Staff and Sea Org, sure, but not the everyday members. Yet they always did. They always did. Amber Vanessa says, I think, and Russell Miller's book talks about swinger parties and Scientology back in the day. I don't remember for sure, the Barefaced Messiah. Interesting. You know what? We should ask John Atack about that when he comes back. Help me remember, y'all. We're going to ask John Atack about swinger parties. I'm sure he'll love it. I'm sure he can't wait. When's he coming back? I'm looking on my calendar. I want to say next Monday. Let's see. Yeah, John Atack's coming back on my channel next Monday. We will ask him about the swinger parties. Help me remember, you guys. The boobologist says, I think Mike Rinder said something about the swinger parties on the ship back in the day. You know, I do recall hearing there was a lot of sexual activity going on, and that's part of how the new rules for the Sea Org came about. Things were much more loosey-goosey back in the 60s and 70s, but that very much changed. But I wonder if that's what they were talking about. Phoenix Book Girl, have you ever covered The Order? Lots of inbreeding going on in that group. I've not. If you know of a good resource for it, and you think about it, maybe shoot me an email, Natalie at lifeafteraccult.com. I remember hearing about The Order, like it sounds familiar, but I don't recall what the exact story was about it. I do remember it being a cult for sure. Oh, interesting, Jeanette. Amish and the Mennonites have a problem with that. I guess I could kind of see that. Kathleen Leary says, well, the Irish way to grow up. My grandmother was 13 when she had my dad. She was sent away to Catholic school. And when she got back with my dad, she was now his sister. And my grandmother was his mother. All right. That I feel like happened a lot, especially back in the day, right? Where, you know, a young girl was sent away and then the parents raised the child that way. And then nobody would ever talk about it. Wow. Sherry, so was it a sibling 20 to 25 years older than you? Wow. No way, Anna. And there's a guy in Europe who lied and donated all over, pretty sure over 1,000 kids. That's insanity. Oh my gosh. So now think about it, right? Like if and when there comes a day where I decide to date again, now I'm going to be all paranoid. Are we related? I'm going to need a DNA test. I'm also going to need access to your My Chart so I can check your health record. And I'll need a full psych evaluation. That's like the standard for, yeah. It's not going to be easy to date me when the time comes. First, are we related? Wow, SB. So her step grandfather S8 her mom. She got pregnant and ran away. She ended up living with her grandma and her dad. She ended up in a relationship with her uncle. Wow, that is messed up. And that's the thing. When it just gets messed up, then boom, 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 it just keeps being messed up till you sort that stuff out. I love it too when John comes by. Thank you, James Still. You got to remind us. It's going to be next week. He usually comes on around 2:00 Central. So, you know, close to this time. Getting to be. That's right. We're going to be John Atack. We want to know all about the Scientology swinger parties. I'll give him a heads up. I will. Oh, the Order is an FDLS branch. FDLS. Okay. I think I'm thinking of another group then that sounded like the Order, but was not. Oh, Amanda Ray's channel has stuff about the Order. Cool. I will check it out. Hey, Get Sweaty with Letty. Great to catch you on the live stream. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Episode drops in 1 hour. No way. Okay, so y'all remember when I did the sauna and the polar plunge? Some of you might have missed it. I posted a short. Well, I was there for a podcast with Get Sweaty with Letty, and that's who this is. So y'all might want to go over and subscribe to his channel. So the podcast interview, I've not seen it, is out in an hour. Cool. I will watch it. And brace yourselves. We got sweaty. I was like, oh, my eyebrows melted off of my face. It is not a pretty look, but to be in a sauna. Oh, that's so exciting. I can't wait to see it. Thanks for popping in. That's so great. So Abigail says that's so common in British societies. I keep thinking of Downton Abbey. Some of those relationships were weird. Mary and her first husband, Matthew, cousin to Mary's grandmother. Exactly. They're all kind of related just to keep, like, I don't know if it's just about keeping the money in the family or what, but it seems to definitely, be more of a common thing in those type of families. Mock says, I may make a DNA test because grandpa was quite generous with his love. Mock, that is a great way to say it. I'm going to start saying that about my dad. My dad was very generous with his love. That's how I have 3 other siblings. 2. We got different moms. But hey, I have other siblings, which I love. So in a way, I'm kind of glad that he didn't know how babies were made and kept making them. Let's see. I once ended up asking myself if grandpa was in Tyrolia around a certain time because the guy could have been dad's twin. Oh my gosh, that's scary. Get sweaty with Letty says, you're the best, Natalie. Face the fear of the cold plunge. Yeah, and I liked it. What I would like to be able to do is get to the point like you were, Letty, because you were just sitting in the water like nothing was happening and it was 17 degrees out, is control my breathing. I couldn't control my breathing. So I got into the water and it was just like that over and over again. And if I could control that, I could stay because it was shocking, but not crazy uncomfortable. And it felt amazing afterwards. I've done a cold plunge and hated it. I've done sauna and hated it. But something about the combination of sauna, cold plunge, sauna, loved it. I really like that. I mean, there's no ice now, but you could still cold plunge because that lake is still freezing. Anna says, oh, yeah, my dad was very generous, had 2 DNA surprise sisters, and I'm sure there are more out there. I know, we got to know. Now, I did I think it was 23andMe, and all the time I'm getting like, hey, you've been matched with new relatives. Nothing crazy. I mean, we did find out that I don't remember which part of the royal family in Hawaii that we descend from. So I don't know if y'all knew this, but you are sitting here in the presence of Hawaiian royalty right now, which, isn't going to get me anything today. But if the monarchy still existed, there's a possibility, at a minimum, I would be in the court. I always tell my sisters, well, I mean, we're really Hawaiian princesses, right? So doesn't work like that anymore, though. Mock says, I had to explain to the guy why I looked at him like I just saw a ghost. He luckily had a sense of humor about it. I worked with him on top of that. Yeah, because how do you start that conversation? Hey, who's your dad? And how sure of you that that is your dad? Have you had a DNA test? Yeah, Anna, we would be ali'i. That's right. Not today, though. Doesn't mean anything ever since, the US government overthrew the Hawaiian monarchy. But hey, I'm not butthurt about it. Cubana Chica, all hail Queen Natalie. Wouldn't have made it to Queen, but definitely would have been in the court, we found out. I really felt ripped off when I found that out. I'm like, why could we not be still? Not that I wanted to live in that time, but if the monarchy was allowed to continue in Hawaii, I don't know, it would be interesting to see what would have happened. But that's not what happened. Tia says that's how Finnish are doing the sauna. You need to have a cooling break. If you are near water, you make a hole to ice and dip. And that makes so much sense to me because when I did it that way, it was so much easier. Like it was enjoyable. I actually liked it then. Cubana Chica, did you ever have the opportunity to talk to your mom about Grandpa Dad after she left Scientology? I didn't. I guess technically I had the opportunity, but I didn't. There were other things that we talked about in regard to Scientology. Um, yeah, we really didn't. I do believe that she loved him. I think it was more almost like a little bit of hero worship though, because he had done through operating Thetan level 3, and he really presented himself as knowing all the stuff about Scientology. Ooh, I've not heard of that, Gencel. Has anyone read Unfamiliar Fishes? I am not familiar with that. I am not. But now I'm curious. Remart says my weird family dynamic is my aunt is only 5 months older than me, and my stepmom is my age, and my little brother is 2 years older than my son. That's funny. Your aunt is only 5 months older. So my brother is a year younger than my son, and my son is my youngest. And my stepmom is my age, and my little brother is 2 years older than my son. There's just so many ways to do it, you know? Jen Sell said it's about the Puritan involvement in the Hawaiian colonization. She's a fun read. Hmm. Cool. I'll have to check that out. I got to go back and look for what the book title was there. And thank you, Northern Girl, for the reminder to hit the like and subscribe, you guys. I appreciate it. So tell me if you're on the replay and you're in the comments, did you ever have or know of a crazy family dynamic like this? Where for me, it was my mom marrying my grandpa. I feel like it makes me feel a bit more normal when there's more of us out there. And I feel like you guys know all the tea. We already learned quite a bit in this chat. We've learned a lot. We also now have a topic for John Atack next week, which is going to be Scientology swinger parties. Tell us what happened. Tamber, yeah, you have uncles at like who are 7. That's what it was like for my brother. And you had a niece and nephew who were born before he was. Yeah, that happens, especially with blended families these days. That is what I got for you all. I might be back again later. We'll see how the days go. I appreciate you all for being here so much. And I hope whatever happens today that you get out and you have a cult-free day.